Hello and welcome to another episode of Down to Disness, a monthly series where I take a Disney animated movie and talk about its history and its impact on pop culture. This month's movie is one of my favorite Disney movies of all time. It is 1998's Mulan. Mulan is unlike a lot of the Disney princess fairy tale movies that came before it, but it is like them in one specific way. Disney likes taking traditional fairy tales and stories and turning them into animated movies, and Mulan is no exception. The story of Mulan can be found in a lot of different forms in China, as poems, as oral tradition, in a lot of different books, but it is basically just a Chinese legend. There are obviously going to be a lot of differences between the original version and the version that Disney made, and so along the way Disney had to make some decisions about how they were going to tell this very classic story. Originally, the story was going to center more around the idea that Mulan was unhappy with her life and felt constrained by the societal expectations around her. In one version of the story, Mulan was maybe going to be betrothed to someone she didn't love, making all of these different things happen in her life that would make her want to escape, leading her to joining the army and fighting for China. Disney ended up not using any of these concepts because what ended up happening was Mulan became a very self-serving and unlikable character. They found it a lot more appealing to have a character that was selfless and was driven by the love she has for her father and her desire to do her family proud. Still, a lot of elements about her feeling kind of trapped by what's expected of her were left in the movie, as we see in the matchmaker scene and in the song Reflection. But something that they definitely tried to keep with Mulan's character was her relatability. Mulan is a messy character. She is a clumsy character. She tries to cheat on her matchmaker test. She is a everyday person with everyday struggles, but ends up doing extraordinary things. When preparing to make this film, the production team took a 3-week research trip to China. Along the way, they were inspired by a lot of the architecture, landscapes, and artwork of the country, and a lot of things ended up being in the movie because of the research trip, namely the appearance of moon doors that you can see in Mulan's home, as well as the abundant use of flags. I never noticed before doing research for this movie that there are so many flags in the movie Mulan because they saw so many flags on their research trip. Per usual, Disney wanted to make this movie as authentic as possible, which is why they went on the research trip, and it's also why they cast so many Asian actors as voices for the movie as well. Another thing that they did was hire an artist named Cgi Chang, who was born in Taiwan, to come do the character designs for the entire movie. Now, he was an artist who was super excited to come work on Mulan because he actually was raised knowing the story of Fa Mulan in China. There are Chinese elements all over this film, but one of the most interesting things that I found in my research is the entire concept of Moo Shu. Originally, Disney was hesitant to give Mulan a dragon sidekick because they thought it would be too menacing and cumbersome to animate, but then they realized through their research that dragons in Chinese lore could be any size. And so making Moo Shu pocket size for her convenience was something that allowed him to be a character in the first place. Something else about Moo Shu's character that I found interesting was the fact that his color scheme was chosen intentionally to give him an air of innocence. They specifically chose primary colors, blue, red, and yellow, to make him seem more childlike, because primary colors are what most children's toys are made with. Speaking of Moo Shu, this was Eddie Murphy's first big voice acting gig. Obviously, he continued on with the Shrek franchise after Mulan, but it's kind of funny to think that such a big actor kind of got his start in voice acting in 1998 with Mulan. Very famous singer and performer Donny Osmond provided the singing voice for Li Shang, and he said that it wasn't until he was cast in Mulan that his children thought he was successful at all in show business. Not until being a Disney movie did his kids think anything of him. Understandably. So Lea Salonga provided the singing voice for Mulan, and the speaking voice went to Ming-Na Wen. It was actually quite a struggle to cast the speaking voice for Mulan because they needed someone who was able to sound feminine but also speak very deeply for when Mulan was impersonating Ping, or her male version of herself. So let's get into some of the things that make Mulan a groundbreaking movie for Disney animation, because honestly, there is a lot to say. First of all, I love it when a Disney movie has a lot of firsts, and Mulan has quite a few of them. Mulan was the first Disney movie to be released on DVD ever. Yep. First Disney DVD, Mulan. It was also the first animated movie to be fully animated at Disney's animation studios in Florida. This was also the first Disney movie ever to deal openly with the concept of warfare. Hilariously, Mulan was almost given a PG rating because of the phrase crossdresser used openly in the dialogue. Now, here's my favorite thing about Mulan. It did so much for CGI animation. I know whenever I'm talking about a 90s Disney movie, I talk about the little steps that were made to advance computer-generated imagery, and I love Mulan for its history with CGI. It is so fascinating. What Mulan particularly did to advance computer animation was reinvent the way that animators could do crowds and scenes of lots of people in one shot. So when they were making Mulan, luckily Lion King had just recently come out, and so they were inspired by the Wildebeest Stampede, which was done with computer animation, and they used this to influence the way that they did the very now famous Hun charge in the mountains in Mulan. So to do a scene like this, they first would do a flat drawn image of the terrain and then turn that terrain into a 3D simulation with little squares running down the 3D landscape. Each square would eventually become an individual Hun and horse running down the mountain. And so they mapped it out to make sure that no one was bumping into each other or crossing through each other or going into each other's paths. It was just a general mapping of the scene. In general, something that they did for Mulan was copy kind of the multi-plane camera effect to give the entire movie more depth. So with Mulan, they did something very similar, but they called it kind of 2.5D, where they would have fully sculpted objects kind of in an animated world, and they could move through those objects like the multi-plane camera moved through different parts of imagery in a scene. This is especially noticeable in the finale at the Emperor's Palace. A lot of the different structures in the foreground are fully sculpted, and then the background with the crowd and the palace is kind of flat, and you can move through the different rooftops and elements on top of the palace for the scene. Another really great scene that features a lot of awesome crowd animation is when Mulan first gets to camp, and there's a lot of different soldiers just standing around the tents and milling about and getting their food and meeting each other. And it was done similarly to the Hun scene, where they mapped it out with little squares where they would put an individual person, but it was really groundbreaking because they had never been able to animate so many people in a scene at once and be able to move them at will and manipulate their actions however they wanted, whenever they wanted. The scene where Mulan is getting bowed to by the entire audience at the Emperor's Palace would feel so much less full and exciting and impactful. So it's really important that they made these advancements because it made the movie so much better than it ever could have been before this point. Speaking of the bowing scene, which is one of my absolute favorite scenes in this movie, I especially love it because in my headcanon, The Lord of the Rings Return of the King stole this moment from Mulan, but honestly, it's probably in the books. Whatever. Producer Pam Coates commented on this scene and how it was intentionally supposed to send a message that Mulan had not only found a change within herself, but through her actions had changed society in some way. That, honestly, at the core is the reason why I love Mulan so much. I find her to be such a compelling heroine. She's just the greatest. Mulan was even part of the reason why Disney had to change the qualifications for who in their lineup became an official Disney princess. It was with characters like Pocahontas and Mulan that they decided that characters didn't necessarily need to be blood royal to be considered an official Disney princess, but instead took into consideration things like acts of bravery and extreme kindness and courage. I am truly so continually moved by the story of Mulan and the movie that Disney made. I think she is arguably the best Disney princess. Don't hurt me in the comments. Let's not forget that she's also the first Asian protagonist, Asian Disney princess ever. That is honestly not to be understated considering the time that this movie was released. Yes, other Disney princesses have been princesses of color. Jasmine and Pocahontas and later Tiana are so equally important, but each step towards more diverse characters in Disney movies is an important one, and having the first Asian Disney princess is a really big deal. Anyway, thank you for listening to me rant and get emotional over the movie Mulan. I hope you learned something new with this episode of Down to Disness. I did Mulan this month because so many of you have been requesting her recently. I do take into consideration your comments down below when you guys tell me what movie you'd like to see me do next month on Down to Disness, so continue telling me what you would like to see. I will do my best to do I will do every movie that you want eventually. It'll just take me a while. Thank you guys so much for watching this month's episode. I will see you guys next month for another Down to Disness. Bye!